The Touchdown Club of Atlanta was founded in 1938. A lot of people forget that. And it was founded by a group of football fans who were looking to promote the game of football in Atlanta. This group would get together each Monday in the fall of 1938 and talk about the games that occurred over the weekend. It was at one of these meetings in early November of 1939, that the group decided to award an outstanding college football player in the Southeast at the close of the football season. This, of course, pretty much meant the Southeastern Conference. This was after the Southern Conference, which was at one point the dominant conference in college football, or at least size-wise. At one point, the Southern Conference, I think, reached 21, 22, 24 teams. And then, early in the 30s, I think 33 to be precise, the Southern Conference broke apart, and select schools started the Southeastern Conference. That's, for all of you out there who maybe weren't aware, that's how the Southeastern Conference started. So by the time 39 rolled around, the Southeastern Conference was now the dominant conference. So if you were going to award a football player in the Southeast, well, that's pretty much where you were looking. In the fall of 43, and in the throes of World War II, the club decided to also award an outstanding prep player to be honored alongside that college football player. Now, this is where our story and the history of the TCA begins. For a frame of reference now, remember the scene in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, especially when it comes to high school football here in the state. A lot of these schools were vocational, like, say, Boys High or Tech High. The Boys High Purple Hurricanes were pretty much the dominant program, as Brad points out here in the Ever Wonder portion of the program. There were a handful of teams that were absolutely dominant, and Tech High, the Smithies, were also on that short list. The games played between the two and some of the other marquee games of the day were played at Ponce de Leon Park. Really, a place that, and again, I'm a major sports historian here, and people forget just how important Ponce de Leon Park was in the early part of the 20th century. In fact, just for another frame of reference, there's only one thing left from Ponce de Leon Park, for those of you who are big-time sports historians out there, or big-time sports fans. Right on East Ponce, across from the old Sears and Roebuck building that they're now turning into lofts and office parks, right across from there is a shopping center with a Home Depot and I think a World Market and a Whole Foods, something like that. Behind that shopping center is a giant magnolia tree with a little plaque in front of it. And that's the famous magnolia tree that sat in center field of Ponce de Leon Park. It's hard to believe that sometimes when people are walking through that parking lot putting their groceries in the trunks of their cars, they could be standing, well, where Ty Cobb and Shoeless Joe Jackson and Babe Ruth all once stood. But I digress. That is the point of why I bring that up, though, and why Brad brings it up is because at the time, Ponce de Leon Park was the home of the Atlanta Crackers, the Atlanta Black Crackers. And a lot of people forget that the Atlanta Crackers were the New York Yankees of minor league baseball, winning, I think, a third of the pennants in their 70-year history. That's where these high-level, high-marquee high school football games were in those days. In 1942, the Smithies got an invite to play in the second annual Kiwanis Club Milk Bowl game. Oh, the names in the 30s and 40s and 50s. The game for Tech High was important to the players and to the school. The Smithies vowed to win this game for a former teammate, Billy Jones, who was killed in action, of course, during World War II. Now, this was a rematch, by the way, between the two teams who played in the regular season, and in that regular season ball game, Tech fell to Boys High 28-14. This time, Tech High would come away with the improbable 15-7 upset. And Billy Jones, again, whose brother was killed in action just a few days before the matchup, played, as the Atlanta Constitution called it, 60 brilliant minutes. This, in retrospect, was the coming out party for the Touchdown Club of Atlanta's eventual first player of the year, a guy by the name of Gene Chandler. Chandler was described by media sources in those days as a rangy, blonde Hercules. And that's a quote now. He was 6'2", 195, and he played center and linebacker. He was far from a great player in his first game in his junior season. That was the first year that he played football, his junior year of high school, which was that 1942 season. By the end of that junior season, though, he would become a dominant force. By the time his senior season rolled around in 43, he was considered, and this is a direct quote now, the most devastating defensive player observed in Georgia high school circles in many seasons. His linebacking play was described as deadly and savage. And Chandler would lead a Tech High defense that in 43 would post 7 shutouts and limit opponents to just 2.8 points per ball game. He would also anchor an offensive line that would pave the way for 29 points per ball game. That 43 team would finish their regular season at 10-2 and would win the Smithies their second straight and third annual Milk Bowl game, 7-6, against an all-star team, all-state all-star team comprised of the best players from around Atlanta. He was voted the best player in Atlanta by the newspapermen of the day and given the Player of the Year award in front of the Touchdown Club and 100 distinguished guests at the end of the year gala. Chandler would go on to play his college football at the University of Georgia under legendary head coach Wally Butts, but not before fulfilling a 2-year naval commitment. Of course, that was pretty common in those days, as many of you probably already know. By the time he would eventually arrive at UGA, Brad tells us in 1946, and according to an article, Coach Wally Butts told his team, "You better not be standing around when Gene Chandler is on the field. He will make you wish you played your football somewhere else." Turned out to be pretty prophetic because Gene would earn varsity letters in 47, 48, and 49, and he would lead the Bulldogs to 3 straight incredible lines of bowl games, the Sugar, the Gator, and the Orange Bowls, while he was starting at defensive end. He would be named UGA's most valuable lineman in 49. Gene would end up, after his playing days, leading a full life in Decatur, Georgia. He passed away in 2006 at the age of 80. The great Gene Asher, who covered prep sports for the Atlanta Journal, said of Gene, and I quote now, "I've been watching football for 60 years, and without a doubt, he was the finest high school lineman I ever saw." It's here that we'll forever remember the name of Gene Chandler. Chandler, the Touchdown Club of Atlanta's first ever Player of the Year. Coming up next, well, next is exactly that. What's next? A very busy GHSA calendar.